Hey everybody, Rob Maurer here, and today we are going to be talking about Tesla's proxy filing for their upcoming annual meeting. Some pretty big news out of that. We've also got a report from Reuters on Tesla's handling of data privacy, some news on China, Berlin, and more. Quick look at the stock. Remember, this is the final day of trading for this week. Tesla finishing down 0.25% for the day to $185.06, while the Nasdaq was up 0.75% on the day. All right, we'll kick it off today discussing Tesla's proxy statement for their 2023 annual shareholder meeting. This was just published after market close today. As we knew previously, the shareholder meeting is scheduled for May 16th, so a little bit over a month from now. Tesla is going to be holding an in-person event at the Gigafactory in Texas, and shareholders can now enter the drawing process to potentially receive an invite to the shareholder meeting. Super easy to do that through your Tesla account, and I'll put a link to do that down in the description today. As for the proxy statement, a couple of key things that we get in this each year are different proposals, whether those are from the board or from Tesla shareholders, and then proposals regarding the members of the board itself. And this year that is particularly interesting, so we'll start off with that because Tesla co-founder and former CTO JB Straubel has been nominated for Tesla's board and has accepted that nomination. I've got a ton of respect for JB, so this is very exciting for me. I think it'll be very exciting for many of us. I definitely plan on voting yes for JB. I think he's an excellent fit for this position, and I'm glad to see him have a little bit more formal close ties with Tesla again. I doubt there will be any issues for JB with this vote, but all the more reason to make sure that you are voting your shares ahead of the May 16th meeting, and we'll talk a little bit more about that process over the next few weeks. Other items relating to the board include Elon Musk and Tesla's chair, Robin Denholm, standing for re-election, and then board member Hiro Mizuno, who I think has been a Tesla board member since 2020, will not be standing for re-election this time around. So thank you to Hiro and all the best moving forward. Now, in terms of other proposals, there are 5 proposals here. 4 of them are coming from the board. The first are those board nominations. The second 2 have to do with executive compensation. The fourth one is just Tesla's accounting firm. So I don't think there's anything too crazy in there. For the executive compensation ones, we may take a closer look at those in a future episode if that is warranted. But then the 5th proposal, this is a stockholder proposal. These can be a little bit more interesting. You may remember that we had a lot of these last year, but just one this year that had to do with the timing of Tesla's filing, I think, and these stockholder proposal groups not being ready for this to happen so early. Some people complained about that, but really you only have yourself to blame because, well, if you had read Tesla's 10K or 10Q, whichever one that was disclosed in, you would have seen this. I think we talked about it on that episode too. And quite frankly, people that aren't taking the time to read those aren't the people that I want to be making stockholder proposals. So incidentally, this kind of frees us up from some of the more elaborate stockholder proposals that we have had over the years. I'm sure those will be back in full force next year, keeping a close eye on it. But for this time around, the sole stockholder proposal that we have is related to reporting on key person risk. The proposal notes that Tesla does acknowledge Elon Musk as being very important to their ongoing operations and is asking for a disclosure of Tesla's planned procedure if anything were to happen to Elon, saying they want to identify key persons, document processes and procedures for their succession, spread knowledge / cross-train successors, manage communication with stakeholders, and financial mitigation of key person loss impacts. So surface level, that all sounds fine, but Tesla is recommending to vote against this proposal. They outline their reasons for that recommendation, noting that adopting this proposal would cause unnecessary competitive harm to Tesla and undermine our efforts to recruit and retain management. They say that by publicly naming key persons and disclosing mitigation action plans, the proposals invite competitors to target and recruit high-value executives away from Tesla, including those who may be identified as potential successors as part of succession planning. Furthermore, executives who are not identified as key persons or potential successors may choose to voluntarily leave Tesla and may create unwelcome tensions amongst the management team. I tend to agree with this. This is all stuff that I would want and expect Tesla to be doing, but I don't see the value in disclosing this. I mean, if you don't have the faith in Tesla's management to be doing this already, is them publishing this plan going to give you that faith? I don't think so. Maybe that's a box to check for some people to feel better about it. Maybe that matters for some institutions, so it's not an idea that I would completely write off, but Tesla is in the best position to judge whether that is beneficial or not. Forcing them to do that, though, to me feels misplaced. So I'll take some time to consider that alongside the other proposals, but personally, we'll probably end up voting against that proposal. A couple of other quick things I noticed in the proxy statement. Tesla did talk about how they have amended their pledging policy to cap the aggregate loan or investment amount that can be collateralized against pledged stock for the CEO. This may have been something that Tesla already did and I missed, but they say that that will be capped at the lesser of $3.5 billion or 25%. I think before that was just a straight 25% cap. So there's a good counter argument for anyone that ever says that Elon is super margined on Tesla stock. Well, no, it's impossible now. And then the other thing that jumped out at me a little bit, just some discussion on retail stockholders in here. It says our retail stockholders are incredibly engaged and tend to have a very strong understanding of the company and are an important base of support and feedback for management and the board. Talking about the shareholder platform that Tesla has been developing, they say we will continue to build the system to maximize depth of engagement and reach. Our goal is for every stockholder who wants to engage with the company to have a meaningful framework for interaction through the shareholder platform. So personally, I think that Tesla does a great job with this. I don't know of another company that does as good of a job engaging with retail investors as Tesla does. I think it's pretty clear that that is very important to Tesla, and it's nice to have that kind of thing called out explicitly. All right, we'll move on from the proxy statement for now. I'll keep taking a look to see if there's anything else noteworthy in there, and feel free to pass along any comments you have as well. But next up today is a report from Reuters on Tesla's handling of data privacy regarding vehicle cameras. The Reuters headline says Tesla workers shared sensitive images recorded by customer cars. The story continues on to say that for this report, Reuters contacted more than 300 former Tesla employees who had worked at the company over the past 9 years who were involved in Tesla's development of autonomous driving features. Of these 300 former employees, it sounds like 9 to 12 of them, depending on which part of the article we're talking about, spoke to Reuters for this report, which goes on to say that between 2019 and 2022, groups of Tesla employees privately shared via an internal messaging system, sometimes highly invasive videos and images recorded by customers' car cameras. Now, right off the bat here, that makes something clear that the headline does not, which is that these things were only being shared internally. There is no part of this report that says that any of these were ever shared externally to Tesla with non-employees, which to me seems like a very important distinction. Reuters also says that they weren't able to obtain any of the shared videos or images, which ex-employees said that they had not kept. Anyway, for these videos and images, the report mentions things that could be potentially embarrassing for customers. They mention a scenario where there was a man approaching a vehicle completely naked. Doesn't even necessarily say that that is the owner of the vehicle, just that that happened. They mention other oddities as well and say that sometimes these things could become memes for the employees. But the report also says that some former employees contacted said the only sharing they observed was for legitimate work purposes, such as seeking assistance from colleagues or supervisors. One scenario they mention in the report is a car accident involving a child on a bike that they say was shared relatively broadly. Again, we have no idea what that exactly means, but I find it very unsurprising that there would be a lot of eyes on something like that, because those things could be very important for safety moving forward. Now, that doesn't mean that's why it's being shared. Maybe it was shared for the shock factor, whatever else, but that isn't something that is conclusive from the information that is being reported. Anyway, from the report, I do think it's likely that there were probably some occasions where what was being shared from one employee to another employee is something that probably should not be shared. It's unfortunate, but whenever you get humans involved, there is opportunities for things like that to happen. Hopefully over time, Tesla can find ways to mitigate those types of actions. And it's also probably worth considering that these are former employees. Perhaps some of these things played a role in that. But in general, I think it's also important to fully understand what data Tesla is collecting, how they're collecting it, what permissions are being given. Because Tesla does give us a lot of information on this. They note that the recordings for Sentry Mode for the internal cabin camera, those are always processed on the vehicle end, not on Tesla servers, unless you give Tesla permission for that type of data collection specifically. The owner's manual makes it clear that by default, images and video from the camera do not leave the vehicle itself and are not transmitted to anyone, including Tesla, unless you enable data sharing. If you enable data sharing and a safety critical event occurs like a collision, Tesla may collect short cabin camera video clips to help with future improvements. And obviously you can control these preferences in your vehicle. Now, I think there might be some required opting in for things like FSD Beta, but I think a lot of that comes with the territory for being an early adopter of things like that. And I think if you do opt in, there's a non-zero chance that some footage at some point from your vehicle may cross some human's eyes. And well, we're human. If that happens, that gives potential for that to be possibly shared. Now, obviously you would hope not, but again, these things have only reportedly been shared internally. For me personally, that's not something that I care too much about, but if you do, then you have the choice to not opt in for those type of things. It's also probably worth noting that Tesla does give you the ability to request data that Tesla has collected on you or your vehicle. I think pretty much everything that we've talked about today is not VIN associated, but for the things that are, you can request more information from Tesla about that on the privacy support page. All right, moving on, we've got a minor update today on FSD Beta. Elon Musk replying to Dirty Tesla on Twitter, who had bumped up a tweet from Elon back at the end of the year, which had talked about the possibility of turning off the steering wheel nag after hitting something like 10,000 miles on FSD Beta. Elon at that time had said agreed update coming in January. We haven't heard anything more about that, but Elon today saying that, quote, we are gradually reducing it proportionate to improved safety, end quote. It has seemed a little bit less frequent for me. It's always kind of hard to know if that's just your imagination or not, but I'm glad to see that coming down because there can be times where your hands are on the wheel or just right there next to the wheel and it's not being registered from a torque perspective. So it's a bit more pleasant to not have to worry as much about that, especially now that Tesla is relying much more heavily on the cabin camera and eye tracking to make sure that monitoring is happening. Next, we've got an update on a story that we had talked about not too long ago regarding Tesla and hiring for Tesla energy positions in China. Here on Twitter, Tesla Chan sharing that Tesla is doing more hiring for energy positions there, including engineers and business development positions. So it continues to be exciting to see those things. There are some rumors today about, maybe an announcement for Giga Shanghai happening. We know that Elon Musk is rumored to be heading over to China pretty soon. So maybe some announcements brewing, not necessarily saying those are Tesla energy related. I think there's potentially some other things going on as well, but should be an interesting period for Tesla in China right now. Next is some action on Giga Berlin. An update from Tobias Lind and his most recent drone flyover of Giga Berlin shows some new construction work happening at the site. Pretty early stages right now. Tobias thinks that this is warehousing, so this may be related to the warehousing stuff that we had talked about yesterday with the permits, but we'll keep an eye on that and follow up as there is more information available. All right, last couple of things for today. We've got a report from Bloomberg that the Biden administration is on track to propose stricter emission standards in the United States for the 2027 through 2032 model years. So depending on what this is, might be welcome. My hopes aren't super high for the standards being put in place. This is planned to be announced in Detroit on Wednesday. I think we've already seen the influence that the car companies in Detroit have had on public statements by the Biden administration, as well as in the EV tax credit structure. Thankfully, there is another strong forcing function here other than regulations to lower emissions, and hopefully that's enough to do the job, but we'll see what these regulations updates are next week. And then also looking ahead, we are now getting very, very close to the first orbital test flight for Starship. It is now fully stacked at Starbase with Super Heavy. SpaceX saying that the team is working towards a launch rehearsal next week, followed by Starship's first integrated flight test about a week later pending regulatory approval. Elon tagging on top of that and one-upping it a little bit, saying that Starship is stacked and ready to launch next week pending regulatory approval. So we'll see. Sometimes this can be a little bit dragged out in the final stages, but it looks like things are getting extremely close now for that monumental orbital test flight. So we'll keep a close eye on that next week. And then just to quickly look ahead at the calendar for next week, a couple of major events with the CPI and PPI on Wednesday and Thursday, and then also the FOMC meeting minutes from the last meeting on Wednesday, which could be kind of interesting given everything that was happening with the banks around that time. As for tomorrow, remember the NASDAQ is closed, so this will more than likely wrap it up for this week for Tesla Daily. But as always, thank you for listening. Make sure you're subscribed and signed up for notifications. You can also find me on Twitter at Tesla Podcast, and we'll see you most likely on Monday for the April 10th episode of Tesla Daily. Thank you.